So glad you're here. I'm Becky Straw. If you're joining new, the co-founder of the Adventure Project, and it is just our pleasure to introduce our celebrity, Charlotte Magayi, who we have had the pleasure of partnering with for the last few years and have just watched her organization, Mukuru Clean Stoves, just blossom and grow. And I know it's not easy, but she's like a beautiful swan where it like looks so great. And I'm sure underneath the water, she's paddling like crazy and has done some phenomenal things with Mukuru and is about to open her second stove production factory. So, Charlotte, I'm going to pass it over to you in a second. But I just want to say, since we've been working together, you've done some remarkable things and have won some incredible awards, including the Earthshot Prize, which is a prize given by Prince William and Princess Charlotte, $1 million, not Charlotte, that's not right. Right? That's like the daughter?
Kate.
Hey, thank you.
Catherine, yeah.
Um, you can tell I'm not a Brit, sorry. But $1 million prize, which has helped you expand this factory even more. So I know you need no introduction on our end and for some of our core supporters, but maybe if you could bring it back first, introduce yourself and talk a little bit about why stoves, just to kind of set the groundwork and framework so that we can learn more.
Thank you so much. Thank you. My name is Charlotte Magayi, and I know a lot of the people on this call have been responsible for some of the impeccable impact that we have achieved. So before I carry on, I'd just like to really appreciate you guys for that. We've really grown over the years, and we met with TAP a while back. But before that, I had founded this organization called Mukuru Clean Stoves, which essentially uses recycled metal to manufacture improved cookstoves. And then we partner with local women business owners to distribute to the last mile. I started it because my own daughter got burnt by a traditional stove, and initially I just wanted to make a more stable stove. And so while researching that, then I really realized that sorry, Helena joined the call and distracted me. Hi, Helena. um, and then I realized that there were other problems that were, really barring our communities from thriving, and that was how household air pollution that kills about 1 million people every single year across the world, and about 22 thousand people in Kenya, and then the high cost of fuel. So we decided we were going to design a stove that would solve all three problems. So limiting the risk of burns in children, reducing household air pollution, reducing the cost for people in underserved communities. And we've been at it for almost 7 years now. We've grown immensely from Mukuru slums to servicing people across 6 counties in Western Kenya, and are hoping to cover the entire country and move into other countries as well in the coming years.
Which is quite an incredible vision. I think one thing that really resonates with me and your story is that you are intentionally targeting people at the very bottom of the pyramid with the most affordable stove possible. You've really worked hard to make it affordable. Could you touch briefly on your process behind that marketing approach, and then also just the incredible savings that families experience from after they purchase the stove?
Oh my goodness. I think in the beginning when we started this journey, it was when we joined accelerators and they were like, you need to make more money. And I was insisting, no, we need to make more impact. And that was mainly because a lot of people build stoves and they bring it into the developing world, but then they set it at a price point that only the middle income earners and above can afford it, leaving behind the people who actually, challenged you to bring the stove to Africa in the first place. So I wanted to ensure that we were making stoves and it was reaching the people who actually needed the stove, not people who had other options. And in order to do that, we needed to, first of all, before anything else, make them a stove that they could afford and make them a stove that would last and make them a stove that would make a difference, that they could, a tangible difference that they could fill every single week. So we used recycled metal to make our stoves, and that reduced the production cost dramatically. And so what that meant for many years was people were able to get a Mukuru stove for $10. And in the beginning, we were even to convince people to buy our stoves. We were having them buy it for $6, because in the beginning the production cost was $6. It has since decreased by almost half. And so we'd have them buy it for $6, and then we'd have them pay $1 every single week. And this would come directly from the fuel savings that they would be seeing. So then other people, they would then be able to tell other people, but I used the stove and I was able to buy $2 less, in fuel. And so that would convince other people to join on the journey and buy a Mukuru stove. And that really helped, because a lot of people are like, wait a minute, it is actually helping us save stoves. Save fuel. And it is very affordable, because again, these are people who want $40 to $100 monthly income. So if you're selling them a $50 stove, they're not buying that. Again, they spend a third of that on fuel consumption costs. So if the promise is that that is going to reduce and they're able to save $2 means you can buy meat for a family that maybe has, vegetables and carbs the whole week. And it means that your children can repair their uniforms. It means so much compared to using a traditional stove that you end up just using more fuel and more fuel every week. And so over the years, we've also managed to work around our production process and reduce the cost of producing a Mukuru stove. Right now is like $3 from $6. And we've also reduced the cost for customers. So now they purchase that stove that used to be $10 at $5, because we've had other projects that are enabling us to, bring in more money into the business. But the goal from the beginning was always to get as many people as possible to have access to a Mukuru stove and do everything possible that we could to ensure that they could afford that stove and didn't necessarily need somebody to come and buy a bunch and give to a village. We needed to give them a stove that they would go into a market, to a local woman business owner, and purchase with their own money, because then they even respect the stove, and then they would be able to use it and see the benefits of it. And that is what we are still working on and hope to be working on for a couple more years, and still this is not a problem anymore.
It's fantastic. And just to reiterate some of the incredible points that you touched on, I think for other people who maybe stoves are very new, is that a stove is a necessity, right? If you don't have one, you're cooking over an open fire, which is using a ton of natural resources, either charcoal or firewood, and that is very expensive. That's something a family either needs to collect and spends a lot of time maybe collecting if you're in an area that you could, or you're purchasing it, which, as you said, I think sometimes spending 40%, 30 to 40% of your expenses just on that fuel source, correct, in Kenya. So having access to one of your stoves is not only really significantly decreasing the household air pollution, but it's also really saving families money, which is really a primary driver for a family which is on a very tight, stringent budget. So it's a great win-win, both for the planet and for, those moms that are cooking those meals every day. So phenomenal. So I want to touch on the next part, which you led us into, which is just how effective you become at production and your vision for growth. I know 2 years ago, you had this vision of opening this factory in Homa Bay. Maybe you could talk a little bit about your vision and then what it has turned into as it starts to become open soon.
Oh man, yeah, it's been a while since we started building the factory. It's finally complete, so thank God for that. But initially, what we were reaching capacity, thanks so much, Michael. We were reaching capacity on our current factory. And so the question then was, we need more space. We need to be able to produce more. And when we started the business, even the place where we set the first factory, you can tell we didn't have a lot of resources. So we ended up not having enough space for the type of growth that we are now seeing. So we set up a factory in Western Kenya still, but the opposite side of Western Kenya. Like you basically have to go around like Victoria to get there, and it gives us access to even larger markets. And initially it was just going to be this factory where we are gonna, just do a little bit more stoves. And then during the course of that, we also, as we were nearing completion for that factory, we won the Earthshot Prize. And what that entailed was, $1 million to produce more stoves essentially and get it into more households. But then we ended up coming up with a new idea for a new fuel as well. So now we have this space that is essentially 6 times the size of the factory that we had before, and is going to be able to provide employment for about 300 people. And I think for us, it's more of we need to get as many people in here, train, recruit on board so they can make the stoves. But we also need to, onboard more women as well to be able to sell the stoves. Because again, we manufacture the stoves, but we don't sell them by ourselves. They're sold by a network of local women business owners across Western Kenya now, in 6 counties and growing. And what we want to achieve with this new factory is to get to 1 million households by 2030. And the first step is increasing capacity. So now we have this space. We just need to get in the people that we need, the materials that we need, and then sell stoves. Because over the last 7 years, that's what we've been doing. So it's just, here's another space, replicate, get into as many households as possible. And that's going to be even easier now than it was in the beginning, because again, the costs of the stove has halved over the last 7 years. And more people, because of the way we market our stoves, are aware of the impacts of household air pollution. And they're even more excited on the prospects of saving on fuel consumption. Because for low income communities, while household air pollution is a problem that they are concerned about, another concern is the cash. So if you're selling them a product that is saving their lives, and saving them $2 every single week. Over the last 7 years, we've enabled communities to save over $50 million in fuel consumption costs. That promise alone enables customers to want to buy that stove. So we're really, really excited to attempt to reach 1 million households within the next 6 or less years. I think it's 5 years now, so scary. But yeah, that is what we want to attempt to do with the new facility. And I think Helena believes it as well. The team believes that it is so doable because it's really just repeating what we know, but with even more information and with more excitement and anticipation within the markets.
No, that's phenomenal. And just for those listening, I'm going to open it up to questions in a minute because I'm sure there's many. Um, as you touch on the stoves, would you feel comfortable talking a little bit more about the vision for briquettes?
Oh, yes, yes, yes. I would love to. I think we are
Great.
very excited about that, Helena, more than me. I'm not sure why. But essentially, after we won the Astro Prize, and this is a very funny story that I think I've only told once. Um, my daughter, who got burnt by a traditional stove, who's now not a baby anymore, she's 13. And I'm in the kitchen, I'm cooking, and then I'm reading this report by the CDC, and it essentially states that people are still catching malaria even when they have access to mosquito nets. And I read it out loud, and my daughter is like, wait a minute. The CDC is saying people are catching malaria right before they go to bed, or either they're not using mosquito nets or they're catching it right before they go to bed. And she makes it my problem. She says they're catching malaria while they're using your stoves, because that is what people do, when right before they go to bed in low income communities. And so I wonder, are there interventions for malaria related to clean cooking? And if not, could Mukuru make one? And a bit more research, and I find out that Kenya and Tanzania are the largest producers of pyrethrin. Pyrethrin is a plant. It's literally this, it looks like a sunflower, but white. And that alone is the strongest insecticide in the world. So for every malaria oil, malaria spray you've used, pyrethrin is inside it. And Kenya and Tanzania are the largest producers of it. So I wonder if we can infuse this into a fuel, which means when families are burning our fuel, they're also repelling mosquitoes. Because again, when they don't have mosquito nets that are distributed for free, there's something called mosquito coils, and that's an added cost. So they're not spending that, even if it's $0.2 or $0.3, it's expensive. But with our fuels, it could come at no extra cost. You're just buying a fuel that is 70% cheaper than the charcoal you're using anyway. So over the last year, me and Helena and a team of researchers and a lot of help. And we received a large grant from a donor in the US to try to attempt to produce this briquette, and we finally, have a prototype, and we're basically trying to now sell this through our network of local women business owners, coupled with the stoves that we have. And we're excited. We were scared for a long time that it wasn't going to work, because we did receive funding to try to make it work, and it took a lot of trial and error. But we finally have a stove, that a fuel that is patent pending in the US, that when banned, it repels mosquitoes for 6 hours. So if families are indeed catching malaria right before they go to bed, and they're cooking right before they go to bed, then we are going to be part of, the community that is enabling them to fight against malaria while fighting household air pollution, and making savings on not just stoves anymore, but on fuel as well. And yeah, that is our exciting new project.
It's also patent pending. Sorry, I just had to say.
We won't steal it, or we just want to support it. And I know, Charlotte, I would be very excited about that if I were you. And I think you should tell that story often, because it's very inspiring. And I love how you're thinking about it. I love that your daughter is part of this story too, because that's what great entrepreneurs do, is they realize what's a problem in our lives and how can we think about solving it, right? It's a very practical, large scale problem, and you picked a very practical solution that's really thoughtful. So I would be very excited about it. I'm very excited about it, and it sounds like
I think
it's going
Scott has
to
a question. Sorry, Becky.
very successful. Oh yes, I should.
Hi. Yeah, my question is just jumping into the technical side of it. I'm very familiar with the mosquito problems from many different parts of the world, but is that something that, like, if you breathe it, it's going to be an issue? Because I mean, once you get something in the air, if it's dealing with mosquitoes, it's also something that people are going to be breathing. So it seems like a little bit of a challenge to kind of find that. It's when you say insecticide, usually insecticides, there's repellents and insecticides, and they do overlap, but they can also be quite harmful to breathe. So I'd just be worried that you're enveloping people in something that's not healthy to breathe. That might actually be good for the mosquitoes, to get rid of the mosquitoes.
Thank you so much for your concern, and that's part of one of the first questions we had to answer while developing this. So pyrethrin is one of the strongest insecticide for mosquitoes and other bugs in the world, but it is also one of the safest in very small quantities. And we do use it in other products, banning it like on mosquito coils as well. So just depending on the amount that you put, I think with everything, too much of it is bad. And that was the reason why we were doing the research first before we just put it in the fuel and then putting it out of the market. But with the research that has been done on mosquito coils, for instance, and that is the biggest one, I think the biggest name in terms of some of these products that are banned to repel mosquitoes. And we're using the same exact products that are used in that. But also doing research, we came up with this thing we called a model world village. And essentially what we were doing was testing it out to see the amounts of it that would work for different kinds of villages across the world. And the way they're set up, sometimes what works in a village in Kenya will not work in a village in Ghana, depending on how the house is built and what the walls of that house look like and the partitioning of it all. And also figuring out what amounts would cause harm to human beings but still kill mosquitoes, and what was harmful and what wasn't. And so that is what has entailed part of the research that we have been doing over the last year, to be able to determine that indeed it will kill mosquitoes, but it will not harm the health of a child. I remember when we pitched this to the investor who then gave us the funding, that was her first concern. Like, you can repel mosquitoes, but can you ensure that it is not going to harm especially children? Because those are the ones who are mostly affected by it, newborns especially. So the simple answer is no. It is not going to cause harm to human beings, but it is going to cause enough harm to mosquitoes to repel it or kill it. And that's another thing. So if we put enough repellent in it to just kill the mosquito, then it would be harmful to humans. So what we ended up with was a repellent that essentially it chases the mosquitoes away, but it doesn't necessarily target to kill them. And it will kill a few, but it doesn't target to kill them. And then there was also the question of people with who have grass thatched houses on top, and so the repellent would stick. So how much would they need to ban? Because when it sticks there, it becomes too much of it, and then it might start causing health problems, compounded. And so then we came up with the solution of essentially ensuring that we have briquettes that are meant for different times of use. So you could use our briquette that doesn't have the repellent in it to cook during the day, for instance, and then you could use this one, a small amount of it, during nighttime. And so kind of like how your cough syrups are labeled like nighttime, and then this one is labeled daytime. So something, a similar plan, ensuring that people are not banning too much of it, even though the research essentially shows that you would have to basically do a barbecue for over 1,000 people every single day in one single room, like 10 by 10 house, for it to create any issues in terms of the health for a child who's below under the age of 5.
Wow.
Well, that's great. And sorry, I didn't want to get the technical stuff is really important, but also I'm sure could be another conversation, but I'm really interested to follow along with what you're doing. Thank you for sharing that. Amazing.
Thank you so much, God, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, I was going to say that is a fantastic question, and also goes to show your answer, Charlotte, of just how thoughtful and intentional you are in everything you do. So my understanding, going back to the Homa Bay factory, is it's going to also have a briquette production with hopes of hiring 200 people alongside hiring 300 people to help produce more stoves. And you touched on this a bit, but I think what's so fascinating is you're also going to be creating 1,000, doing job training for 1,000 new female vendors who are then going to be selling the product in local markets. Could you touch on that a little bit and maybe talk about their earning potential and adding that to their supply chain?
I'm excited about that, Becky, because over the last 7 years, from the beginning, we always did work with women to distribute our stoves, and it's always been very clear that women are the ones who are impacted by household air pollution, by high cost of fuel, by the crazy amounts of time that it takes to cook, and mostly them and their daughters if they're in a rural setting, especially. And so I'm excited because of the work Mukuru has done so far to ensure that we are producing stoves that also, I didn't mention this before, they cut cooking time by half. But now we have this new opportunity to bring in even more women into our pipeline. We have a few who sell stoves. They manage to get between $7 to $8 more every single week in terms of household income from the commissions that they make from our stove specifically. But we don't have enough, and we are creating jobs for people to create more products, and the more products we create, the more agents we need in new specific markets. So 1,000 because we are growing immensely, so we need more to open new markets, but we also, within the markets that we're already in, but we also need to enter new counties and new countries as well. And what that is going to mean, especially with the fuel, I'm excited about the fuel because the stove is essentially one product that a family can buy, and the stove lasts so long that it's not a recurring cost. They can only bring you another customer. But the beauty with the fuel is they will buy it every single day. So even if your commission on 1 kg of it, or 5 kgs, for instance, is $0.2, it's a recurring $0.2 and from several households. So over the last 7 years, it's been women increase their household income for between $7 to $8 a week. But right now we're looking to almost, $30 per week on just selling the fuels and the stoves as an added product. So now it's more of, we're excited about the stove, but we're excited about the possibility of them having this new product that replaces charcoal. And there's a way they're placed in this market that's always been very exciting to me. It's literally a really big sack, and then they put out a kilo. So we're looking into maybe doing the same thing, so people are able to connect that it is a fuel immediately, because that's how we see charcoal in rural markets in Kenya especially, or packaging it in boxes. We haven't really decided yet, but the exciting part of training these women to be able to do that is over the last 7 years, they've been talking about household air pollution, the benefits of using clean cooking, and encouraging their customers to buy briquettes. But now they won't just be doing the encouraging, they will be selling the briquettes themselves and making even more money from it. And so, yeah, we need to create 1,000 more jobs for these women. And that involves just recruiting, training, partnering with local women groups and local governments to ensure that we're getting to the right people and we're getting to everyone as well. Because sometimes you enter a market and you don't know how deep it goes. You don't know what other villages are hidden in the back, but a local government will be able to pinpoint, every single location that you haven't reached just yet. So yeah, that's what we're up to.
No, fantastic. And I'll wrap up at the end of ways that people can help and what the Venture Project wants to do, but maybe I'll open it up for some questions because I think you've brought up such incredible points. So thank you, Katie, for posting that. And I know Brady, our board president, actually chimed in with a great comment about how thoughtful and impressive your work is. If anybody sees anyone hand raised, Scott, I see Scott. Yay.
I don't want to dominate. I've got so many questions, so you're gonna have to cut me off. But I just go for one on the briquettes. You might have mentioned it and I missed it, but I'm very interested in wood waste, sort of the value chains for wood products. Are you looking at wood sourcing for the briquettes that has a particular sustainability story that could be linked to, say, other industries that maybe are producing wood waste? I mean, this is a major challenge worldwide, but in Africa especially, is like finding that balance between, growing, using wood in all of its different ways. And this briquette piece would be one really nice piece of a complex puzzle.
Yeah. Thank you so much for asking that question, because this is important, especially because I would have forgotten entirely to mention that we are not using wood at all. We're using macadamia husks. So we're using agricultural waste. So we're using coconut husks, macadamia husks. We are figuring out a way to use maize cob waste as well. And so the best to use would be macadamia and coconut husks, but we want to mix it all together. And we did do a LEAP project with the Earthshot Prize the year after we won, and essentially it was us paying farmers in stoves, because again, farmers, they have the produce but they don't have the cash. So we did a LEAP project where it was essentially waste for fuel for stoves. And so we would pay the farmers in stoves and they would give us the agricultural waste. And so what we do is they bring in maybe 20 kilos of maize cob waste. And then if that was, say, 1,000 Kenya shillings, we'd give them 500 in cash, and the other 500 would go into their stove wallet. And then and the other $5 would go into their stove wallet. And at that point, we were still selling our stoves at 1,000 Kenya shillings. And so what would happen was, once the stove, you had enough money in your stove wallet. Sorry, I'm a bit distracted. Someone is trying to call me. Once you have enough in your stove wallet, then we give you a stove, and also you've been able to make cash from that. But then during that research, we realized in order to be able to make really efficient briquettes and not use wood at all, we needed coconut husks and macadamia nuts. And so again, looking into those partnerships with farmers, we're currently speaking to Waneka Fund, because they have a lot of macadamia husks to dispose of, but also talking to people in coastal Kenya who they sell essentially coconut husks. So you carbonizing that, essentially turning it into charcoal, and then turning that into a briquette and selling. So completely not using firewood. I know a lot of people use that, and there's so much, like, bamboo is good for that. We just wanted to see if this can be done without that. And I think it really can, because if you use husks, they could be more effective. They burn longer, they burn better than bamboo, for instance.
Well, let me just end with a suggestion that as you're moving through this, I mean, this is going to be an interesting, complex experiment in terms of the efficiency and the costs of all of these inputs. There is wood waste, which is otherwise potentially doing nothing and just kind of going back into the atmosphere. So to divert a waste stream, if it is actually a waste stream, into briquette making, would also be great. And wood has a high energy, depending on the species and many factors. So don't rule it out. And if you're interested in that, like, talk to us, because that's kind of what we do day in and day out, is sort of look at wood value chains and like having value for waste products from wood, from say carpentry or cabinetry industries. There's many like industries that are generating say sawdust and other bits of wood waste that have no value at all, and they just basically get put into landfill and then they just go right back to the atmosphere. So at least harnessing the energy from that would be displacing others. But if you have like agricultural waste that actually work and they're economical, then that's great. I mean, that's fantastic. So, but you might find that there's different profiles and even mixtures of different inputs that perhaps maybe 50% sawdust and macadamia nut makes an even better product. Who knows? But it's an exciting journey.
I think I would love to have that conversation. We'll just reach out to you, and maybe Helena can take your contacts, because I hadn't considered that completely, because I think I was liking the idea of working with farmers a little bit better. And yeah, so I think I would love to have that conversation. Thank you so much, Scott. I really appreciate it.
Scott, maybe you can share your link to your website in the chat for everybody who doesn't know you, but Scott is a fantastic friend and monthly donor, and also runs an incredible organization really looking at waste and sustainable forests.
Nice. Thank you.
Yeah. Looking for any hands up here. Maybe I'll give it one more second. Scott, is your hand still up?
Sorry, I'll take it down. But if no one has a question, I'll have another one. But just
all right,
everyone else first.
Well, I'll lead into the Adventure Project's role, which we are excited to be undertaking as an organization dedicated to creating really good jobs. And if you can't tell, Mukuru does it better than anyone else, both in terms of creating really good jobs for factory worker, artisans, and soon to be briquette makers, and then the vendors selling them, and then leading to helping those households save, is it 110 US equivalent per year?
Yeah.
Which, if you really think about saving 110 US, it's phenomenal for somebody who is getting by on $2.15 per day. That is a really impactful number when you think about being able to save that much money. And just, I think you said 50 million has already been saved because of Mukuru's incredible work. So now that this factory is built, I think, Charlotte, if you could talk to us a little bit about your needs for hiring and training and what that entails, and how the Adventure Project is I'll segue into the ask to the pitch. If you could just talk about a bit, just briefly, how many people you want to train, how many vendors.
Thank you so much. So I think I mentioned it a little bit briefly, but now we're bringing in briquette manufacturers as well, but we have artisans who make our stoves, and we need to bring in about 300 by the end of the year. So that is by January of 2025. So we have about 7 months. And then we need to bring in about 200 people to make the briquettes. We did receive, we've received some support to enable us to get some of the materials. We have machinery on its way to Kenya right now to help us with these endeavors. And then for us to be able to sell that many, because we have a very bold goal of reaching very many households across a short period of time. We're trying to onboard about 1,000 local women business owners across another 3 counties in Western Kenya, again by January 2025, in order to be able to sell more, distribute more stoves, and also the briquettes that we are hoping to also start distributing by January of 2025. I'm excited about that, because I feel like before it was like we want to bring in these new people, but it's always, but where are we going to station them? So now we have the space, we have the machinery, and we have the financing for the materials that we're going to need to get us there. And so we just need the human capital for us to be able to get into more households. And that's essentially why we need your help.
That's fantastic. I'm gonna do a rapid fire. Oh, Michael has a Q&A question off of that. Michael, sorry.
Yeah, hi Charlotte. Can you talk a little bit more about the specific hiring process? So like obviously hiring 300 people, working to manufacture the stoves and 200 to manufacture briquettes is a huge undertaking, not to mention training the 1,000 kind of stove vendors. Is it an interview process? And I'm kind of curious, like what you've learned from your other factory about what works really well, like what kind of candidate you're looking for. And then I'm also curious about the manufacturing process. Is it an assembly line, or is it kind of one vendor, or sorry, one stove mason making one stove at a time?
Just in case I forget the last question, let me answer it first. So it's not an assembly line. It's essentially every artisan being able to make their stove from top to finish. And this is we have the fabrication part, and then we have the molding part as well. This is different artisans, and then we have the ones who finish with the painting. So to answer your first question, we have about 300 people we want to employ in terms of, artisans essentially. And we're doing this in small groups. So we're starting with 100. And how that works is we do onboarding, we do training, and then we do recruiting. And we do it that way. Before it was recruiting and then training. We do it that way because fabrication work is really, really difficult. And we work with young people. And this is a rural area. So finding them is very hard and was almost impossible in the beginning until we discovered a hack, again, working with local governments. So these are local chiefs who no one knows how to find these youth better than them, and no one knows where, like, if you're looking for a specific skill that they already have, maybe they learned, in a polytechnic nearby, they help us with onboarding this youth. We do the training first so that we're sure that they can deliver the type of stove that we're trying to make. And then we finalize with the recruiting, and we're going to basically rinse and repeat for briquette manufacturing as well. Briquette manufacturing itself is different from a stove. Not one person is doing the entire process. It's different processes. There's carbonizing, the briquettes themselves, there's drying, there's, pressing, there's different parts of it. And so they're going to be trained to do different parts of the production for the briquette. But for the stove, it's essentially, if you're doing fabrication work, we train you on cutting, we train you on measuring, we train you on assembling. And then we have people who, just a few people who we also train on serialing, because we're still doing it a little bit manually. We're working on getting a machine to change that because it is a bit redundant. We need to find a better way of doing it, but that's essentially how it works. So we have different trainers, and these are people who are also artisans within Mukuru themselves. They've been with us for a very long time. Some of them are a little bit older and have been doing fabrication work for way longer than Mukuru, like almost as long as 20, 10 years. And so they do the training themselves because they're the best in-house, and they're artisans themselves, but then they have their own roles as trainers for these specific artisans. And then we have the people who train on the molding as well. I'm not sure if I forgot a question. I think I did, but please just remind me if I did.
No, that was perfect. Super thoughtful. Definitely understanding the differences too between, kind of what the needs are for the stove manufacturing or fabrication process, and briquettes will be fun to kind of learn that as well. So yeah, appreciate the thoughtful answer.
Thank you, Michael.
And I think you mentioned the training for vendors as well, that you are excited
Oh,
to.
no, I don't think I mentioned that. Sorry. So just to jump into that. So for our vendors, what we do is, normally when people call them vendors, I'm like, they're not vendors, they're sales agents. Some of our people, we have salespeople who come from other organizations, and then they give them other names like distributors. And I'm like, no, they're sales agents. I don't know. I feel like we started with that and I don't want to let it go. But our sales agents, how we recruit them is probably the most exciting recruitment process. And what we have is we reach out to influencers. And basically, if you are on Instagram, these are the Kim Kardashians or villages who people want to be like them. People want to live like them. And a lot of them, they're like chief's wives, so they are the biggest shop within a local market. And typically, they're part of something we call a women's group. And they would have like between 10 to 30 people within this group. And most of the time, they're not just moms, they're not just wives. they're business owners. So they own really small businesses across that community. And they're the ones who then we reach out to and we onboard. And normally we group them in two. The influencers who have maybe businesses that would not appeal to Mukuru, say they have a large retail store outside of that community, they would become our early adopters. We will convince them to be the first people to buy our stoves. And if it is the chief's wife and their neighbor sees them with it, it's like you seeing, an influencer with shoes that you want to buy. You can't really afford them in that space, but with the beauty of Mukuru stoves is you can actually afford them because they're $5. So you want to buy the stove. But then we also recruit the women. Most of them are usually tailors. And the reason why they're tailors is because every market has a tailor. So it's typical for you to find a tailor. And because a lot of their work is you have to open your shop, so you're always doing advertising, they already have a bit of experience, with displaying the dresses they're making, with talking to customers, because you have to be friends with people because you want them to come back in a few weeks to buy a dress from you. So then we will work with them. And then after they agree to come on to be our sales agents, then we proceed to the onboarding and then the training. And the training usually entails what I just mentioned. Some of them have a bit of a basic understanding of, displaying, bookkeeping, record keeping, and some of them do not, especially if they're not tailors or if they're new to business. Some of them are young women who just started their small businesses. And really what we need from you is just a bit of experience in that market and doing a business that allows you to interact with the people in that community on a daily basis. Even if they're not buying from you, you're just having conversations with them, you're repairing their children's uniforms, you're selling them, eggs, or selling them vegetables. And you have a space that can be locked because, again, we're going to give you our stoves to keep, and then every morning you take them out. And we have field officers who come and help them with that. And once we do that, we do a bit of training, and this training is done recurrently. So in the beginning, the onboarding is hard, the first training is hard, but we're planning on our media training. So we do trainings every 6 months, and this is for our field officers and our sales agents. The only people we don't do recurrent training for are the artisans, because they're making the stoves every day anyway, so they're in training the whole time. But for the field officers and the sales agents, there's need to remind them on how to sell Mukuru stoves, how to pitch it, what to communicate, what not to communicate. And yeah, so this is how we do the onboarding for the sales agent. Sorry, I didn't answer that, Michael.
Great,
that's
appreciate it.
so helpful. And I feel like I learn something brand new every time I talk to you. It's always fascinating to learn about your model and just how thoughtful and intentional it is. On that note, if there's no more questions, one of the things I wanted to confirm with you. So you have this vision of opening the Homa Bay factory, 300 jobs for stove masons. Am I correct that they will have the capacity to then produce roughly 500,000 stoves per year? Is that correct?
So you're correct in assuming that. Right now, last year we sold about 227,000 stoves. And so with this, I think what we're seeing in our projections is about 600,000, but we can go with 500,000 because, again, with the recruitment, it's going to take time. And what happens is they also do drop off because it's artisanry work. So they're going to come in and make some stoves and then go, and then it takes them time to pick up. But after maybe 2 years, they're going to be able to produce consistently 500,000 stoves every year.
500,000, yeah, which is no small task. I think that's pretty phenomenal of you to be thinking at this level and thinking about just the sheer impact and number of that. So just to break it down, is a venture project is taking on kind of this awesome role of working hard with our community of supporters. I think Michael, we had about 630 people that actually contributed something to help your factory be constructed over the last 2 years, which is pretty great. People from all over the country, some people actually from Kenya, gave generously to help Charlotte get this factory off the ground and contribute a bit. And so now we really want to see you fill that factory with these incredible artisans and sales agents so that they can continue to grow. So our hope is that we can make that possible. I think one of the most impactful things that I keep coming back to is getting to the end user and realizing that each person is going to be saving $110 So that's a phenomenal, as you mentioned, $50 million has already been saved because of Mukuru. So we were doing math and just realizing, wow, if you get up to the point that you're producing 500,000 stoves per year for these 300 people, that means that, you know, every supporter that says, I'm going to create one job, I think that's really important to not only give that person an income, but then that's going to help you hire 2 more sales agent in the community to sell them, you know, going to 1,000 sales agents. Your job creation support will be helping a household save $183,000 annually for people living in extreme poverty. So you'll be serving close to, I think, what was the math? I think it was 8,000 people, 1,600. We were trying to do some math, figuring out like 1,500 just stoves per artisan. I mean, it's just phenomenal to think about that. Someone like us in the US saying, I'm going to take on this awesome responsibility of helping Charlotte create one job is going to then ripple to help, you know, families save $83,000 a year in fuel savings. So I just commend you so much for making this so impactful. We have a link. We're for those of you on the call, the Adventure Project is going to be taking on this campaign in June and dedicating our month of June to Charlotte and helping her fill her factory with remarkable artisans and sales agents. So if you are interested, I think we'll put in the chat a link where you can sign up. Maybe you can help share the campaign when it's live. Maybe you can say, I can help give for a job. Let me talk to my family about it. We're going to commit to sponsoring a job. Or maybe you can fundraise for a job, you know, get your friends and family involved and say, this is really important. Not only am I seeing the impact of helping lift somebody out of poverty with a great job, but then seeing that ripple continue. So if you can, let me see if I can like send, here's where my Zoom skills are really fun, but I need to send a chat to everybody. theadventureproject.org/advocates if you want to learn more. So if you are able to join our community, we're going to share information over the next 2 weeks of how you can help share out this campaign when it's live and just give it the wings that it needs to take off and soar, because we are so incredibly honored to be partnering with Charlotte and Helena and her team. And we are so proud of what you've accomplished and can't wait to see you grow and flourish in many ways. So this is a huge goal for us. It's probably the biggest goal the Adventure Project has taken on, honestly, in this short of time frame, creating this many jobs, but we're excited to do it. And I know our team is also thrilled to be taking it on. So thank you so much for making time for us, for connecting with us. It has been such a pleasure, and I always learn something whenever I chat with you. So thank you.